In the endless reaches of the Nebulon Empire, a vast realm spanning galaxies and star systems, strength, beauty, and legacy were held above all else. For decades, Queen Elara had been the Empire's guiding light, revered for her wisdom and elegance. Under her rule, the kingdom thrived, peace, prosperity, and unity. But as time moved forward, it became a cruel force. Her radiant silver hair and once glowing sapphire eyes had dulled with age, and the absence of an heir to secure the future of the Empire became an unforgivable flaw in the eyes of her husband, King Aldran. The king, consumed by the desire to ensure his bloodline, grew weary of the failure to produce an heir. His affection for Elara turned to frustration, and soon it withered into indifference. Whispers of his advisors grew louder, feeding his insecurities, and the decision was made. Elara was no longer fit to stand by his side. In a cruel decree, she was stripped of her titles, her dignity, and her place in the royal court. Cast out, she was sent to the desolate, frozen moon of Thaler, a place reserved for those deemed useless. As the royal shuttle departed, leaving her on the barren landscape, Elara stood tall despite the cold winds that whipped at her tattered robes. The grandeur of her former life felt like a distant echo as she gazed out at the barren moon. "So this is how it ends," she whispered, her breath forming visible clouds in the freezing air. Yet, even as despair threatened to overtake her, a spark of defiance remained. She would not fade into obscurity. Gathering the last of her strength, she activated the communicator embedded in her exiled beacon, a message broadcasted into the void of space. "To anyone who can hear this, I am Queen Elara of the Nebulon Empire. I have been cast aside, deemed unworthy, but I am not ready to fade. Help me prove them wrong." Light years away, aboard the starship Solstice, Dr. Kian Archer leaned back in his chair, sipping a cup of tea as the ship's AI, named Echo, hummed softly in the background. A renowned physician and biologist known for his work with interspecies medicine, Kian had traveled to the furthest corners of the galaxy to heal and offer aid to those in need. Despite his accolades, however, the daily challenges of his job never seemed to lessen. Another distress signal flashed across his console, the fifth request from a mining colony this week. But then, a different message caught his attention. Unusual, Echo's voice noted, cutting through the monotony. A signal from the Thaler system, originating from a beacon. High-priority encryption. Kian raised an eyebrow. "Thaler," he murmured, leaning forward as the message played, filling the cabin with the haunting voice of Elara. Her words, filled with a tremor but a quiet resolve, echoed through the ship's speakers. "I am Queen Elara of the Nebulon Empire. I have been cast aside, but I am not yet ready to fade. Help me prove them wrong." "That's unexpected," Kian said aloud, his mind already analyzing the situation. A queen exiled for being too old to have children. They really threw her away, didn't they? Echo responded, "Not your usual patient, I suppose. Should I prepare a course of action?" Kian didn't hesitate. She asked for help. "That's all I need to know." The journey to Thaler was tumultuous, as Solstice braved fierce ice storms and asteroid fields. When they finally landed, the barren, windswept landscape stretched out before Kian, a vast nothingness broken only by the ruins of an old mining settlement. As he donned his thermal suit and grabbed his medical gear, he made his way toward the shelter where Elara was waiting. The sight that greeted him was humbling. Elara sat on a broken bench, her regal posture still intact despite her gaunt frame and the tattered remnants of her robes. Her sapphire eyes, once filled with the light of a kingdom, were now dimmed, but still held a flicker of both suspicion and hope as she watched the approaching stranger. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice wary, though there was a faint trace of curiosity beneath the caution. "Kian Archer," he replied, setting down his equipment. "I heard your call. I'm here to help." A bitter smile crossed her lips. "Do you pity me, human? Come to witness the fallen queen in her misery." Kian met her gaze without flinching. "I'm not here for pity. I'm here because no one deserves to be left like this." Elara studied him, then nodded slowly. "Then let's see if you can do what no one else would." Without another word, Kian began setting up his portable medical station. The stark, cold interior of the shelter contrasted with the soft hum of advanced human technology. As the diagnostic tools hummed to life, Elara sat still, watching him closely. Kian glanced up from his tablet. "Before we start, I'll need to assess your overall condition. This might feel invasive, but I need accurate data to help you." Elara's lips tightened, but she gave a curt nod. "Do what you must." He activated a hovering diagnostic drone, which emitted soft pulses of light as it scanned her body. The results appeared on his tablet: malnutrition, organ stress, and severe cellular degradation, all consistent with prolonged exposure to extreme cold. Yet beneath the damage, there was a surprising resilience, a body beaten but not broken. "You're stronger than I expected," Kian said, his voice sincere. Elara raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised. Impressed," Kian replied, glancing up. "Your body's fighting back even in these conditions. That's more than most could manage." For the first time, Elara's hardened expression softened slightly. "A queen must endure," she said quietly. Over the following days, Kian administered treatments, using nanobots to repair cellular damage and boost her immune system. He prepared specially designed meals to restore her strength without shocking her fragile system. Elara followed his instructions with the discipline of someone who had once ruled an empire. Their conversation started off brief, but over time, the walls between them began to erode. Kian spoke of Earth, of its lush landscapes and diverse cultures. Elara listened intently, her curiosity breaking through her guarded exterior. "You humans," she said one evening, as Kian adjusted her treatment regimen, "you have a strange resilience. You venture into the unknown driven by what? Curiosity? Foolishness?" Kian chuckled. "A bit of both, probably. But mostly we like to help where we can. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning." Elara tilted her head, studying him. "Help? Such a simple word, yet it carries more weight than most realize." By the end of the first week, Elara's condition had improved. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her movements became steadier. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of vitality, a glimmer of the strength she thought was gone forever. One morning, as Kian conducted his usual checkup, Elara asked a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Why did you come here, Dr. Archer? I've given up on understanding why anyone would answer my call." Kian paused, his hands still as he considered her question. "Because I've seen too many people turn away when they needed help the most," he said finally. "I didn't want you to become another name on that list." Elara's gaze lingered on him, her expression unreadable. "And what do you expect in return? Wealth? Fame? My gratitude?" Kian met her eyes, his tone unwavering. "None of that. I just want to see you stand again, to take back what's yours." For a long moment, Elara was silent. Then, to his surprise, she smiled, a small but genuine smile. Weeks had passed since Kian Archer first set foot on the frozen moon of Thaler, and with each passing day, Queen Elara's condition improved. Her once gaunt frame had gained a small amount of strength, the pallor fading from her skin. The healing treatments Kian administered had worked wonders, and despite the harsh environment, Elara's spirit seemed to grow with her body. Her posture, once hunched in exhaustion, had begun to regain its regal poise. But despite her physical recovery, the emotional scars of her exile remained, and the bitterness of betrayal lingered. Elara found herself gazing out over the barren horizon in the mornings, her eyes far away as if searching for something she had lost long ago. Kian was used to it by now. He knew the signs of emotional struggle, especially in those who had lived through such powerful lives and then been cast aside. But he remained patient, continuing to administer her treatments while offering only quiet support when needed. One afternoon, as the two of them sat in the shelter, the weight of silence between them finally became too much for Elara to bear. She broke it, her voice calm, yet thick with unresolved feelings. "How long do you think you'll stay here, Kian?" Her voice was steady, though a hint of an unspoken question echoed within. Kian, who had been adjusting some of the advanced nanotech that had been helping her recover, paused. He glanced up, his expression thoughtful. "As long as you need me." Elara raised an eyebrow, her eyes narrowing slightly. Do you really believe that? Or are you simply fulfilling some duty? A duty to a fallen queen? Kian's gaze softened, his voice even. I don't take on patience out of obligation. I help because I believe in what's possible. I've seen the change in you already, Elara. I came because you wanted to fight, and that's enough for me. For the first time in a long while, Elara's steely demeanor cracked, if only for a second. She looked away, as though trying to dismiss the vulnerability his words stirred in her. It's foolish, you know, she said softly, almost to herself. I've had everything, a kingdom, power, a place in the stars. Now I'm nothing more than a forgotten relic. Kian put down his equipment and walked over to her, his voice gentle yet firm. No one is ever truly a relic. And you're not forgotten. You just need to remind the universe what you're capable of. Elara turned to face him, her lips pressing together as though she was about to say something, but hesitated. Finally, she spoke. And what if that's impossible? What if the king's decision is final? Her voice trembled slightly, a crack in her otherwise composed facade. Kian met her gaze, unflinching. Then it's up to you to prove him wrong. The universe may have forgotten you, but I haven't. You've shown me more strength than most rulers I've known. Your story is far from over. Elara considered his words in silence. After a long pause, she finally spoke again, her voice low and hesitant. And what about you, Kian? What do you gain from this? There's nothing for you here on Thaler. No wealth to be gained, no glory to be found. You've done what you set out to do. Help me heal. Why stay? Kian thought for a moment, his expression thoughtful. He then walked to the entrance of the shelter and gazed out at the vast, icy expanse of Thaler. The wind howled, but it didn't reach him in the warmth of the shelter. I stay because you're right, he said slowly. There's nothing here in the traditional sense of wealth or fame. But that's never been what drives me. I've seen the best and worst of this galaxy, and what matters most is making a difference in the lives of others. When I first came here, I saw someone who was discarded, who needed help. But now, I see a queen who hasn't lost her fire, who still has something to prove. Elara was silent for a moment, her heart heavy with emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. A mix of gratitude and disbelief filled her chest. She had once ruled an empire, commanded armies, and lived in the lap of luxury. Now, she was here, exiled to a desolate moon. But something in Kian's words, the sincerity, the belief in her still, began to melt the hardened shell she had wrapped herself in for years. Her voice broke the silence. If I rise again, it won't be for power. It will be for something more important than that. Kian turned to her, his expression open. Then we'll figure it out together. But you won't do it alone. A new sense of purpose settled into Elara's chest. It wasn't just about reclaiming her lost throne or securing a legacy. It was about something deeper, about regaining her identity, her strength, and proving that she was more than the mistakes of the past. The next few days brought more change. Kian introduced new treatments, more advanced procedures to help Elara rebuild her strength, and the two worked together with a growing sense of purpose. As she regained her vitality, Elara began to return to her former self, though it was not her past that mattered most. She was becoming someone new, someone who could fight for what she believed in. One morning, as they sat together, Elara turned to Kian with a look of quiet determination in her eyes. I need to go back to the Nebulon Empire, she said. I need to speak to Aldran. Kian didn't hesitate. I'll go with you. Elara met his gaze, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. I don't know what's waiting for me there, Kian. The king will not welcome me. If anything, I may be walking into a trap. I've helped you get this far, he replied. I'll stay by your side until the end, whatever that may be. Elara's lips parted slightly, her expression shifting into something unspoken. I never thought I'd trust someone again, not after all that's happened. But I trust you. And so, with the resolve of a queen and the loyalty of an unexpected ally, Elara began to prepare herself for what lay ahead. The journey back to the heart of her empire, to the place where she had once ruled, would not be easy. But with Kian by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Her story was not finished. It was only just beginning. In the distance, the stars beckoned, as if calling her back to the throne she had once held, a throne she would reclaim. Not for power, but for herself. The cold winds of Thala howled outside the shelter as Elara stood, the pale light of the twin moons casting long shadows over the barren landscape. The transformation in her was undeniable. Her body had regained strength, and with it, her spirit. She no longer saw herself as the discarded queen exiled to a frozen world. No, she was Elara of the Nebulon Empire, and her journey back to power was now a matter of when, not if. Kian stood beside her, his usual quiet confidence unwavering. He had supported her through countless medical procedures, offered her comfort in her darkest hours, and in the process had become something more than just her healer. He had become her ally. But there was still a lingering uncertainty in Elara's heart. The path she was about to walk was dangerous, and despite the growing bond between them, she wasn't sure if Kian truly understood the risks. She glanced at him as they prepared to leave the shelter, her expression unreadable. "Are you sure about this, Kian? Once we leave this moon, there's no turning back. The Empire won't welcome me. If anything, I'll be walking into a trap." Kian didn't flinch at her words. "I've seen your strength, Elara. The Empire may not welcome you, but they'll have no choice but to listen when they see what you've become. And as for the trap, if it's set, then we'll deal with it together." Elara met his gaze, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel something akin to hope. With Kian at her side, she wasn't just a queen, she was a force. She turned towards the small shuttle that would take them to the Nebulon system. The journey would take weeks, but Elara had no intention of wasting any more time. The king, her estranged husband, Aldran, would be her first target. He had betrayed her, cast her aside, and allowed his advisors to convince him that she was unfit to rule because she couldn't bear him an heir. She was no longer the woman she had been when she was exiled, and she knew that Aldran would soon learn that his abandonment of her had been his greatest mistake. As the shuttle lifted off from Thalar's icy surface and into the void, Elara's thoughts turned to Aldran. She had once loved him, trusted him, and believed in their shared vision for the Empire. But all of that had been shattered when her inability to produce an heir became the focal point of his discontent. She would never forget the coldness in his eyes as he cast her aside, as though her worth was tied solely to her ability to bear children. It had been an unforgivable betrayal, one that had left her broken, but it had also given her the drive to rise again. "You're quiet," Kian's voice broke through her reverie. Elara sighed, staring out the small viewport at the stars streaking past. "I was thinking about Aldran, about how easily he cast me aside. He was so sure that my worth was tied to my ability to bear him an heir. But I've learned since then, a queen's value isn't defined by children. It's defined by her strength, her leadership." And he forgot that. Kian nodded, his gaze focused ahead as the shuttle sped through the stars. "And now you're going to show him just how wrong he was?" Elara smiled faintly, the fire in her heart rekindling. "Yes, I will make him regret the day he ever doubted me." The journey was long, the days blending together in a blur of travel and strategy. Elara spent most of her time in her quarters, preparing herself mentally and emotionally for what was to come. Kian remained by her side, offering support when needed and keeping a steady hand on her healing process. Though there were moments of silence between them, there was a quiet understanding that spoke louder than words. They had come a long way together, and now their fates were intertwined. After weeks in transit, the Nebulon system finally came into view. The planet that had once been her home now felt foreign, alien. Elara's heart beat faster as the familiar shape of the Imperial Palace came into view, its towering spires a cold reminder of everything she had lost. The shuttle descended into the royal landing bay, and Elara's pulse quickened. This was it. She was no longer the exiled queen. She was a force, ready to take back what was hers. As the doors of the shuttle opened, Elara stepped onto the ground of her once glorious palace. She felt the weight of her past here, memories of her reign, of her time with Aldran, and the sharp sting of betrayal. But she held her head high, her back straight, her posture the same as it had been when she ruled. She was the queen of the Nebulon Empire, and it was time for the galaxy to remember that. Kian followed her, stepping off the shuttle with the same determination. They were a strange pair, an exiled queen and a human doctor, but together they were unstoppable. They were met by a small contingent of royal guards, their faces impassive. "State your business," one of them demanded, his tone flat but wary. Elara didn't flinch. "I am Queen Elara of the Nebulon Empire. I have come to speak to King Aldran." The guards exchanged glances, and the leader's eyes narrowed. "The king is not expecting you. You are no longer welcome here." Elara's eyes hardened, her voice firm. "Tell him I am here, and tell him that he will regret abandoning me." The guard hesitated, then nodded. He turned on his heel and walked toward the palace's inner halls. Kian stepped closer to Elara, his expression serious. "Are you sure about this? Aldrin might not be as receptive as you hope." Elara turned to him, her eyes fierce. "I'm not asking for his approval. I'm here to take back my place, my empire, and my future. No one, not even Aldrin, will stop me." A tense silence hung in the air as they waited. Elara's heart raced, but she remained composed. She had nothing left to lose, except the throne, and that she would reclaim. Moments later, the guard returned, his face unreadable. "The king will see you now." Elara nodded and strode forward, Kian by her side. The doors of the throne room opened before them, and Elara stepped into the heart of the palace she had once ruled. At the far end of the room sat King Aldran, his back turned as he gazed out a large window. His regal posture was unchanged, but Elara could see the subtle signs of age on his face. When he turned to face her, his expression faltered for the briefest moment. But then, he regained his composure, his voice cold. "So, the fallen queen returns. What is it you want, Elara?" "To beg for forgiveness." Elara's eyes burned with the fire of a woman who had been wronged. And now, she would make sure Aldrin felt the consequences. "I'm not here to beg for anything," she said, her voice steady but unwavering. "I'm here to take what's mine. The throne, the empire, my future." Aldrin's face hardened, but Elara could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It was too late for him to doubt her now. The game had begun, and Elara would win. The throne room was silent, heavy with the weight of Elara's words. King Aldran, sitting on his grandiose throne, his sharp gaze cutting through the space between them, studied her as if she were a puzzle he could not solve. "You think you could just walk back in here, claim what was always yours?" His voice was measured, icy, yet there was a tremor in it, something that betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Elara stood tall, her posture as regal as the first day she had entered this room, back when the world had been hers. The room felt colder than it had ever been before, but not because of the freezing winds from the open windows. It was the chill between her and Aldrin, the remnants of years of betrayal, resentment, and shattered trust. "I think," she began, her voice steady, "that it is you who has forgotten what truly belongs to you. The Nebulon Empire, Aldran, is not your personal kingdom to discard as you see fit. It belongs to its people, and to me. I've bled for it, fought for it, and ruled it with wisdom and strength. And I will do so again." Aldrin's eyes flashed, the mask of calm slipping for the briefest moment. "You abandoned it when you failed me, Elara. The people demanded an heir, a child who could carry on our line, our legacy." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, but Elara was not moved. She had heard it all before. She had lived it. His words were nothing but the echo of his own fear and inadequacy, a fear of losing his legacy, a fear of losing power. She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "And you abandoned me when I didn't give you one, as though that was all I was good for." She paused, a quiet chuckle escaping her lips. "Do you even remember who I was before you turned me into your broodmare, Aldrin? I was a queen, a ruler in my own right, with plans, visions, dreams of my own. But your insecurities consumed you, and now you have nothing but regret. Well, I'm here to take what you've so carelessly thrown away." Aldrin's gaze darkened, the sharp edge of his features taking on a more menacing tone. You think I've thrown you away? No, Elara. I did what was best for the Empire. You are too old, too weak. The Empire needs new blood, fresh strength. At those words, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Something dangerous, something primal. The years of exile, the years of feeling forgotten, abandoned, and discarded, all the sharp memories of her betrayal surged to the surface. I am not weak, Elara growled, her voice low but full of the fury that had been building inside her for so long. And the people will see that. Kian, standing just a step behind her, kept his gaze fixed on Aldran, his posture cautious. The tension in the room thickened, and even he could feel the weight of Elara's defiance, the raw energy that had been lying dormant within her for far too long. Aldran chuckled darkly, his hand resting on the arm of his throne. You think you could take back the throne? You, with your fragile, human healer at your side. He gestured to Kian dismissively. What will a mere human do for you? You've been reduced to relying on them. Elara's lips curled into a bitter smile. A mere human, you say? Kian is the one who saved me. He is the one who saw my worth when you abandoned me. He doesn't view me as a failed vessel for your legacy. He sees me for who I truly am. Her voice hardened. But you were never worth saving, Aldran. The king's expression tightened at her words, but Elara did not flinch. She had learned long ago that the only way to survive in this world, in this empire, was to never let them see you weaken. You are no longer welcome here, Aldran declared, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You've come to challenge my reign, to take from me what is mine. But you have no claim, Elara. You are nothing more than a discarded memory. Elara's eyes flashed. Then it's time for you to remember, Aldran. You will regret your choice. With a signal, the doors to the throne room opened, and a dozen elite royal guards stepped in, their weapons glinting in the dim light. They surrounded Elara and Kian, their presence threatening, but neither of them backed down. Aldran raised his hand, silencing the guards. Do you really believe you can fight all of us? You're nothing. You're alone. The Empire has moved on. Elara's heart hammered in her chest, but she did not let it show. She had spent too long as a forgotten queen. She would not back down now. She glanced at Kian, who met her gaze, his eyes steady, unwavering. He didn't see her as an old queen past her prime. He saw her as she truly was, strong, capable, and unyielding. I'm not alone, Elara said, her voice clear and commanding. And I don't need to fight to reclaim what is mine. The Empire will see through your lies. It's only a matter of time before they remember who their true queen is. Aldrin's gaze hardened. You are foolish. Your words mean nothing. The people won't follow you. They will, Elara countered, her eyes narrowing. When they see what you have become. The truth is a way of finding its way to the light. And you will be exposed for the coward you are. She turned on her heel, motioning for Kian to follow. He did so without hesitation, his expression unreadable but firm. As they walked toward the doors, the guards made no move to stop them. Leave now, Elara, Aldran called after them, his voice laced with fury. If you think you can escape the consequences of your actions, you are sorely mistaken. Elara paused at the door, her back still to him. She didn't turn around, didn't look at him again. The consequences, Aldran, are yours to face. You've made your choice. I will make mine. The doors slammed shut behind them. Once they were outside, Kian spoke softly, his voice filled with quiet concern. You know that was just the beginning, right? Elara nodded, her expression set in determination. Yes, I've only just begun. Aldran's reign is over. The Nebulon Empire will be mine again. And for the first time in years, Elara felt the undeniable fire of her while burning brighter than ever. The path ahead would be treacherous, filled with obstacles, but she would not be denied. No one, not Aldran, not the Empire, and certainly not the weight of time, could hold her back now. She would rise, and she would reclaim what was hers. The Nebulon Empire was her birthright, and no one could take it from her. The winds of the barren desert planet scorched the horizon as Elara and Kian stood before the Grand City gates. Behind them, the city sprawled like a maze of metal and stone, the towering spires of Aldran's capital casting long shadows over the earth below. It had been months since Elara had last seen this place, and yet the smell of its sterile, metallic air felt both foreign and familiar. The sun hung low in the sky, a burning orb that seemed to reflect the fire within her chest. She had come to reclaim the throne, not for herself alone, but for the people who had been abandoned in the wake of Aldran's self-serving reign. "I've spent my entire life fighting," Elara said, her eyes locked on the distant city. "Fighting for power, fighting for legacy. But this time, I'm fighting for something bigger." Kian stood silently by her side, his presence reassuring, though he hadn't yet spoken of his feelings toward the monumental task ahead. He had never been one for unnecessary words, but Elara knew that, like her, he had a fire in his heart, one that burned with a quiet intensity. "What's the plan?" Kian asked, his voice calm, but the question was loaded with a weight of its own. The plan. They had no army, no resources, just the two of them and the hope that the people of the city would rally to her cause. "First, we need allies," Elara said, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her cloak. "There are those who have been ignored, those who want change but are afraid to act. We have to find them. And the king?" Kian raised an eyebrow. "Do you really think he'll let you take the throne without a fight?" Elara smiled bitterly, her eyes glinting with something far colder than the desert wind. "Aldran is nothing if not predictable. His fear of me is his weakness. He will never see me coming." They began their trek toward the city, the long shadows of the spires growing longer as they approached the gates. Inside, the streets were filled with the usual hustle and bustle of a world under the thumb of a monarch who valued only his own bloodline. But it was different now. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a subtle shift in the way the people moved, the way they spoke. Elara's reputation as the exiled queen was known. Whispers of her return had spread like wildfire, but the true test would come once she began speaking to the people themselves. She needed them to see her as more than just a discarded queen, more than a failed wife. She needed them to see her as the ruler they deserved. They entered a dimly lit tavern at the edge of the market square, where a mixture of workers, mercenaries, and city dwellers sought refuge from the heat. The room fell silent as the door creaked open, but Elara's presence commanded no less attention than any ruler entering a hall of power. She was not the woman she had once been, the frail, discarded queen exiled to a desolate moon. She was stronger now, stronger than she had ever been. At the bar, a large man with dark tattoos across his arms looked up. His eyes met hers, a flicker of recognition crossing his face before it settled into wariness. "Elara," the man said gruffly, "I didn't expect to see you back so soon. Thought you were a ghost by now." "I'm far from dead," Elara replied, her tone icy but controlled. "I've come to reclaim what's mine, and I'm not asking for permission." The man sized her up, then nodded slowly. "You got nerve. I'll give you that. But what makes you think anyone here would fight for a lost cause?" "I'm not asking for your loyalty," Elara said, stepping forward with a slow, measured stride. "I'm offering you a future, a chance to fight back against the rule of a man who has forgotten what it means to serve the people. Aldran's reign has left us divided, but together we can take him down. And together we will rebuild this empire." The room murmured, the atmosphere thickening. Kian stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, but his stance unwavering. "Why will we fight for you?" The man at the bar asked again, his voice skeptical. "You're not a queen anymore. Aldran has the people's trust. He controls everything." "Does he?" Elara asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "Tell me, what has Aldran given you? Peace? Prosperity? Or is it only his own bloodline that thrives while the rest of you are left to starve?" A few of the patrons exchanged glances, the tension in the room mounting. Elara could feel their skepticism, their doubt, but also the flicker of curiosity. It was all she needed. "Aldran is a tyrant, and I am the one who will give this empire back to its people," Elara continued, her voice gaining strength. "A king who abandons his queen for failing to bear him a child is no ruler." He is a coward, and I promise you, if you stand with me, you will not be forgotten. We will take back the throne, and we will make the Nebulon Empire great again." A murmur ran through the crowd, growing louder. The man at the bar grunted, his eyes narrowing as he looked Elara up and down, then to Kian. "All right," he said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You got my attention, but you'll need more than just words. I don't believe in fairy tales. I'll give you more than just words," Elara replied, her gaze hardening. "I'll give you results." And so it began. The first step in reclaiming her empire had been taken. Elara knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. But she also knew one thing for certain. Aldran's reign was crumbling, and she would be the one to bring it down. As the people in the tavern murmured among themselves, a single spark of hope flickered in the hearts of those who had been oppressed for too long. They would follow her, and together they would rise,